At the end of May 1941, some of the world's most powerful warships jeweled in the middle of the Atlantic, all revolving around the flagship of the German Kriegsmarine, Bismarck.
October 28, 1943, Philadelphia Naval Yard. A destroyer escort sits at Pier 4, humming with electromagnetic energy that makes compasses spin wildly 200 feet away. USS Eldridge, hull number DE-173, freshly commissioned, crew of 186 men. The official record says she was conducting routine degaussing tests, a standard procedure to protect ships from magnetic mines. But 3 sailors who were there that day told a different story before they died. They said the ship didn't just resist magnetism, it disappeared, completely. Vanished from Philadelphia and reappeared 200 miles south in Norfolk, Virginia for exactly 15 minutes before snapping back. The Navy called it a hoax. Dismissed it as wartime paranoia and conspiracy theory nonsense. Case closed for 80 years. Until last month, when a construction crew renovating the basement archives at the Philadelphia Naval Yard found something that shouldn't exist. A sealed concrete vault marked with a classification code that doesn't appear in any naval registry. Inside, they found 23 reels of 16mm film, undeveloped, and a leather-bound logbook with entries that stop abruptly on October 28, 1943. The film has now been processed, and what it shows contradicts every official statement the Navy has made for 8 decades. This isn't about proving the Philadelphia experiment happened. This is about explaining why the evidence was buried in a tomb nobody was supposed to find. Because the film doesn't show a ship disappearing. It shows something worse. It shows the ship coming back. The vault nobody knew existed. The construction workers weren't looking for history. They were installing new electrical conduits in the sub-basement of Building 77, a nondescript brick structure at the Philadelphia Naval Yard that had served as administrative offices during World War II. The building had been renovated multiple times, its interior gutted and rebuilt, its purpose changed from naval operations to storage to offices and back again. Standard procedure was to scan for old wiring and pipes before drilling. That's when the ground-penetrating radar picked up an anomaly. A rectangular void, roughly 8 feet by 12 feet, buried 4 feet beneath the concrete floor. The construction supervisor assumed it was an old coal cellar or utility space, common in buildings from that era. But when they broke through the concrete, what they found was far more deliberate. The vault was constructed from reinforced concrete, 18 inches thick on all sides. The door had been welded shut, then covered with additional concrete, then sealed with a layer of bitumen waterproofing. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure this space would never be opened accidentally. There were no markings on the exterior, no documentation in the building plans, no mention in any renovation survey. It was as if the vault had been built, filled, sealed, and then erased from institutional memory. When the welding torch finally cut through the door, the air that escaped was dry and stale, preserved since the 1940s. Inside, the space was pristine. No water damage, no corrosion, no signs of decay. And in the center, on a steel shelf bolted to the wall, sat a wooden crate stamped with faded black letters. Metal-spec Project Rainbow Eyes Only. Project Rainbow. The name appeared nowhere in declassified naval records. No budget allocations, no personnel rosters, no equipment requisitions. Yet here was a crate marked with that designation, sealed in a vault that someone had tried very hard to make permanent. The construction supervisor made the right call. He stopped work, secured the site, and contacted the Navy. Within 6 hours, a team arrived from the Office of Naval History, photographed everything, and removed the crate. The official statement released 2 days later was brief. Historical materials discovered. Under evaluation. No further comment. That should have been the end of it. But one of the construction workers had taken a cell phone photo before the site was secured. The image was grainy, shot from the doorway of the vault, but clear enough to show the crate and the stenciled designation. He posted it to a naval history forum with a simple question: anyone know what Project Rainbow was? The post went viral within 48 hours. Researchers, conspiracy theorists, and former naval personnel flooded the thread with speculation. And then, 3 days after the photo was posted, someone claiming to be a retired naval archivist sent a private message to the original poster. The message contained a single sentence: they found the film. The Office of Naval History denied that any film had been recovered. They stated that the crate contained routine administrative documents, nothing of historical significance, certainly nothing classified after 80 years. But the denial came too quickly, too emphatically, and it raised an obvious question. If the contents were routine, why was the crate sealed in a concrete tomb? The film that wasn't supposed to exist. 3 weeks after the vault was opened, a copy of the film surfaced. Not through official channels, not through a Freedom of Information request. It appeared on a secure file-sharing platform used by investigative journalists, uploaded by an anonymous account that vanished within hours. The metadata had been stripped, but forensic analysis confirmed the footage was authentic 16mm film stock, manufactured in 1943, processed recently, no digital manipulation. 23 reels, each approximately 4 minutes long, shot from multiple fixed cameras positioned around Pier 4 at the Philadelphia Naval Yard. The timestamp on the first reel reads 9 hours 14 minutes and 33 seconds, October 28, 1943. The footage begins innocuously. USS Eldridge is moored at the pier, crew members visible on deck performing routine tasks. Thick cables run from the ship to a series of large electrical generators positioned on the pier, standard equipment for degaussing operations. Degaussing was a real and necessary procedure during World War II. Ships would be wrapped in electromagnetic coils and subjected to controlled magnetic fields to neutralize their magnetic signature, making them invisible to magnetic mines. The process was well documented, routine, unremarkable. What's shown in the first few minutes of film matches that description perfectly. Except for one detail that makes no sense. The generators on the pier are not standard degaussing equipment. They're too large, too numerous, and configured in a way that doesn't match any known naval electrical system from that era. A naval electrical engineer who reviewed the footage noted that the cable arrangement suggests a phased array system, where multiple generators are synchronized to produce overlapping electromagnetic fields. That technology wasn't developed until the 1960s for radar applications. Yet here it is, clearly visible in 1943 footage, powering something the Navy claims was a routine test. At timestamp 9 hours 31 minutes and 47 seconds, the generators activate. The film doesn't have sound, but you can see the effect immediately. The air around the ship shimmers, a heat haze distortion that spreads outward from the hull. Crew members on the pier step back. One man raises his hand to shield his eyes, as if looking at something painfully bright, though the ship itself shows no visible light source. The distortion intensifies over the next 90 seconds. The outline of the Eldridge begins to blur, the sharp lines of the hull and superstructure softening like a photograph slipping out of focus. Then, at timestamp 9 hours 33 minutes and 29 seconds, something happens that the laws of physics say is impossible. The ship flickers, not like a light bulb failing, but like a frame of film missing. One moment the Eldridge is there, solid and real. The next moment, for exactly 3 frames, approximately 1/8 of a second, the space where the ship should be shows empty water and the far side of the harbor. Then the ship reappears. The cameras keep rolling. Over the next 4 minutes, the flickering increases in frequency. The ship phases in and out of visibility, the intervals growing longer each time. By timestamp 9 hours 37 minutes and 11 seconds, the Eldridge is gone for a full 12 seconds. When it reappears, the image is wrong. The ship is there, but it looks translucent, like a ghost ship. The details of the hull visible but somehow hollow, as if you're looking at a projection rather than solid steel. The cameras continue filming for another 8 minutes. During that time, the ship stabilizes, the distortion fading, the electromagnetic shimmer dissipating. By timestamp 9 hours 46 minutes and 0 seconds, the Eldridge looks normal again, solid, real, ordinary. The generators shut down. Crew members begin disconnecting cables. It looks like the test is over, except the crew on deck isn't moving correctly. They stumble, move erratically, some collapse. 2 men fall overboard, others drop to the deck and don't get up. The film shows sailors from the pier rushing aboard, dragging injured men off the ship, carrying them toward waiting ambulances that weren't visible in earlier footage. The final reel ends abruptly at timestamp 9 hours 52 minutes and 14 seconds. No fade to black, no formal conclusion. The film simply stops, as if whoever was operating the cameras cut the power mid-shot. The logbook with deleted entries. The leather-bound logbook found in the vault alongside the film reels is standard Navy issue from 1943. It's labeled Project Rainbow Observational Log, and it contains handwritten entries spanning 6 weeks, from September 15 to October 28, 1943. The handwriting is neat, precise, clearly written by someone trained in technical documentation. Most entries describe equipment tests, generator calibrations, electromagnetic field measurements, routine engineering notes, but scattered throughout are observations that suggest the writer was documenting something far beyond a standard degaussing operation. September 22, 1943, field harmonics achieved stable phase lock at 437 kHz. Observational effect minimal. Local compass deviation noted within 200-foot radius. No biological symptoms reported. September 29, 1943. Increased field strength to 68% maximum rated output. Observational effect pronounced. Test animal. Rabbit, placed on deck, exhibited disorientation and elevated heart rate. Removed after 4 minutes. Animal expired 6 hours post-exposure. Cause of death undetermined. October 12, 1943. Full power test conducted with unmanned vessel, PT boat hull. Field strength 100% for 3 minutes. Observational effect extreme. Hull materials showed molecular displacement upon examination. Structural integrity compromised. Recommend live test postponed pending further analysis. Recommendation overruled by project oversight. The entries continue with increasing urgency. The writer, whose name is never mentioned, clearly has concerns about the safety of the tests. But the most disturbing entries are the ones that have been redacted, not with black marker, which would be standard for classified information. These entries have been physically removed. 7 pages have been cut out of the logbook with a razor blade, so cleanly that you barely notice unless you examine the binding closely. The missing pages correspond to October 23 through October 27, the 5 days immediately before the final test. Whatever happened during those days, someone decided the information was too sensitive to leave in a logbook that was already being sealed in a concrete vault. The final entry, dated October 28, 1943, is written in a different hand, shakier, less controlled. Full operational test conducted 9-14 hours. Field strength 100% for 12 minutes. Observational effect total. Event duration 11 minutes 37 seconds. Casualties. 27 crew members unaccounted for. 16 crew members deceased on scene. 43 crew members transported to medical facility with severe physiological trauma. Project Rainbow hereby terminated by order of bishops. All documentation to be sealed under magic clearance. This log represents the final official record. Below that entry, written in different ink, possibly added later. They didn't tell us what we were building. They didn't tell us what would happen. God forgive us. The crew manifest that doesn't match. USS Eldridge was commissioned on August 27, 1943. Her official crew complement was 186 enlisted men and 15 officers. Standard for a destroyer escort of her class. The Navy maintains detailed records of every sailor assigned to every ship, and those records show that on October 28, 1943, USS Eldridge had a full crew aboard. But when researchers cross-referenced the official roster with medical records, casualty reports, and post-war veteran databases, they found something disturbing. 63 men listed as serving aboard USS Eldridge during October 1943 have no subsequent service records, no discharge papers, no reassignments, no medical files. They simply vanish from documentation after October 28. The Navy's explanation is administrative error. Records were lost during the war. Paperwork was mishandled. Database consolidation in the 1990s introduced errors. All plausible explanations for a handful of missing files. But 63 men? That's not administrative error. That's systematic erasure. And it gets stranger. Of the 123 crew members whose records do continue past October 1943, 48 were transferred off USS Eldridge within 2 weeks of the October 28 test. Most were reassigned to shore stations, medical facilities, or administrative posts, far from combat duty. Their service records contain unusual notations: medical observation, psychiatric evaluation required, restricted duty pending review. One sailor, Seaman First Class Thomas Haverford, was transferred to the Philadelphia Naval Hospital on October 30, 1943. His medical file, partially declassified in 2003, Contains a brief admission note. Patient exhibits severe disorientation, memory loss, and reports visual hallucinations. Physical examination shows no external injuries. Neurological symptoms consistent with extreme electromagnetic exposure. Recommend extended observation and psychiatric evaluation. Haverford spent 6 months in the hospital. His discharge summary states, patient recovered, returned to limited duty, no further incidents reported, but his family tells a different story. According to his daughter, interviewed in 2009, Haverford never spoke about his time on the Eldridge. He suffered from nightmares for years, woke up screaming about being stuck between places. He died in 1987, and among his personal effects, his family found a small notebook. Most pages were blank, but on one page, written in shaky handwriting, I was there and I wasn't. I saw the pier and I saw something else. Water that wasn't water. Sky that wasn't sky. We weren't supposed to come back. 3 other crew members left similar accounts. Not official statements, not interviews with investigators. These were private journals, letters to family, deathbed confessions, all describing the same thing. The ship disappeared. They experienced something impossible, and when they came back, something was wrong. Some said they felt like they were in 2 places at once. Others reported seeing crew members walk through walls, or vanish mid-sentence, or reappear in different parts of the ship with no memory of moving. One man described looking at his hands and seeing them flicker, going transparent for seconds at a time. These accounts were dismissed as trauma-induced hallucinations, stress reactions, wartime psychological breakdown, except they all describe the same specific details, and the details match what's shown in the film. The physics that shouldn't work. It's a passive process. You're not generating power. You're redistributing existing magnetic properties. The generators shown in the footage are producing something entirely different. Dr. Ellen Krauss, a physicist specializing in electromagnetic field theory, analyzed the film and the technical descriptions in the logbook. Her assessment: this wasn't degaussing. This was an attempt to create a resonant electromagnetic field envelope around the entire ship. The theory, if you can call it that, relates to something called electromagnetic field unification. In the early 1940s, physicists were exploring the relationship between electromagnetism and gravity. Einstein himself worked on unified field theory during this period, trying to develop equations that could link the 2 fundamental forces. The math suggested, theoretically, that a sufficiently powerful and precisely tuned electromagnetic field might interact with spacetime itself, creating localized distortions. But the energy requirements were astronomical. The technology didn't exist. The theory was incomplete, and most physicists dismissed the idea as mathematically interesting but practically impossible. Yet the equipment shown in the film looks exactly like what you'd need to generate a resonant field envelope. Multiple synchronized generators creating overlapping fields, phased to produce standing waves around the ship. If you could tune those waves to the right frequency and maintain phase lock, the theory suggested you might create a bubble of altered spacetime. The ship wouldn't move. Space around the ship would. Dr. Krauss was careful to emphasize that this is speculative. The physics involved are at the edge of what we understand even today. But she acknowledged that if someone in 1943 had access to Einstein's unpublished field equations, and if they had the engineering capability to build the necessary equipment, they could have attempted this experiment. Whether it would work is another question. The fact that the ship flickered on film suggests something happened. Whether that something was controlled, predictable, or safe is a very different matter. And here's the part that makes experts uneasy. The energy requirements for creating a spacetime distortion, even a tiny one, are immense. The generators shown in the film couldn't produce that kind of power, not even close. So either the film is a hoax, which forensic analysis says it isn't, or there was another power source, something not visible in the footage, something the Navy never documented. One theory, proposed by electrical engineers who've studied the cable configuration, is that the Eldridge itself was part of the circuit. The ship's hull could have been used as a massive capacitor, storing electromagnetic energy and releasing it in controlled pulses. This would explain why crew members experienced biological effects. They weren't just near the field, they were inside it, their bodies subjected to electromagnetic forces strong enough to interfere with neural activity. Another theory, darker and less scientific, suggests the power source was experimental nuclear material. The Manhattan Project was in full swing by 1943, and while the Navy officially had no access to atomic research, Compartmentalized projects operated in parallel. Could the generators have been powered by an early nuclear reactor? No evidence supports this directly, but the medical symptoms described by survivors, disorientation, cellular damage, unexplained deaths, are consistent with radiation exposure. The Norfolk sighting that can't be explained. The most famous claim about the Philadelphia experiment is that USS Eldridge didn't just vanish from Philadelphia. She reappeared, briefly, in Norfolk, Virginia, 200 miles to the south. This part of the story has always been considered the most absurd. The detail that proves the whole thing is a hoax. Ships don't teleport. Except there's a problem. Multiple witnesses in Norfolk reported seeing a destroyer escort appear at the Naval Yard on October 28, 1943, between 10 o'clock and 10:15 a.m., and their descriptions matched the Eldridge. The sightings were documented at the time, not retrofitted decades later. A Norfolk Naval Yard log entry from October 28, 1943, recently discovered in National Archives records, reads, "In scheduled de-class vessel observed at Pier 7, 10:03 hours. No arrival notification received. Harbormaster attempted radio contact. No response. Vessel departed 10:17 hours. Wake pattern inconsistent with standard propulsion. No engine sound reported." 3 civilian dock workers gave statements the same day, describing a gray destroyer escort that appeared without warning, sat motionless in the water for approximately 12 minutes, then vanished. Not sailed away, vanished. One worker, interviewed by Navy investigators, stated, "It was there and then it wasn't, like someone switched off a projector. I've worked these docks for 20 years. I've never seen a ship move like that." The Navy dismissed the reports as misidentification, probably a different ship, confusion about timing, wartime stress. But here's the problem. There were no other de-class vessels scheduled in Norfolk that morning. The logbook specifically notes the vessel was unscheduled, and the timing matches perfectly. If the Eldridge vanished from Philadelphia at 9:33 a.m. and reappeared in Norfolk at 10:03 a.m., that's a 30-minute gap. The film shows the ship flickering in and out of visibility for approximately 11 minutes. What happened during the other 19 minutes? One researcher, Dr. Marcus Holt, proposed a disturbing possibility. If the electromagnetic field experiment created a spacetime distortion, the ship might have experienced nonlinear time. From the perspective of observers on the pier in Philadelphia, the ship was gone for 11 minutes. But from the perspective of the crew aboard the ship, trapped inside the field envelope, they might have experienced hours, days, or no time at all. The Norfolk sighting could represent a moment when the field destabilized, causing the ship to temporarily manifest in a different location before snapping back to Philadelphia. This would explain why witnesses described the ship as motionless, not responding to radio, and disappearing without sailing away. It was never fully there. It was a projection, a quantum echo, caught between 2 points in space. This theory sounds like science fiction, but quantum mechanics allows for precisely this kind of phenomenon on subatomic scales. Particles exist in superposition, occupying multiple states simultaneously, until observed. If you scaled that effect up to a macroscopic object, like a ship, you'd expect exactly what witnesses described. An object that exists and doesn't exist, present in 2 locations, collapsing back to a single point when the field collapses. The math supports the possibility. The physics is theoretically sound, though never demonstrated, and the witness testimony, recorded contemporaneously, matches the prediction, which raises a terrifying question. If the experiment worked, even partially, what happened to the crew members who were aboard during those 19 unaccounted minutes? The medical records that were destroyed. After October 28, 1943, 16 crew members of USS Eldridge were pronounced dead at the scene. 43 others were transported to the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. Their medical records should be in the National Archives, standard documentation for any military casualty or injury. But when researchers requested those files under the Freedom of Information Act, they received a stunning response. The records were destroyed in a fire in 1967. The fire was real. A blaze at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis destroyed approximately 16 to 18 million military personnel files. It's considered one of the greatest losses of American military documentation in history. But here's what makes researchers suspicious. The Eldridge medical files weren't stored in St. Louis. They should have been at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital Archives, a completely different location. Why were they transferred to St. Louis? And why were they among the specific files destroyed? One nurse, Dorothy Klein, who worked at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital in 1943, gave an interview in 1994. Just before her death, she described treating sailors from the Eldridge in late October 1943. She said the men were brought in on stretchers, most unconscious, some screaming incoherently. She recalled, "They had burns, but not normal burns. The skin looked crystallized, like they'd been frozen and thawed. Some had their hands embedded in metal rails they'd been holding. We had to cut the rails to free them." One man kept saying he was stuck, that he couldn't move between moments. He died 3 hours later. We were told not to talk about it, not to document it in our personal notes. The official cause of death for all of them was listed as electrical accident. Klein's account was dismissed as confused elderly memory, but hospital admission logs from October 1943, obtained through a separate FOIA request, show 43 sailors admitted on October 28 from USS Eldridge. Their listed injuries: severe electrical burns, neurological trauma, psychological distress. All 43 were transferred out of Philadelphia Naval Hospital within 2 weeks, sent to different facilities across the country. None of their subsequent medical records have ever been located. It's as if the Navy deliberately scattered the survivors to prevent any single doctor or facility from recognizing a pattern. And that pattern would have been obvious. These men weren't injured by electrical accident. They were injured by something the Navy couldn't explain and didn't want to document. The scientist WHO disappeared. Every secret military project has a lead researcher, someone whose name appears on requisitions, technical reports, progress memos. For Project Rainbow, researchers have identified one candidate, Drive Franklin Reston, a theoretical physicist who worked for the Navy's Bureau of Ships from 1942 to 1944. Reston specialized in electromagnetic propagation theory, precisely the expertise you'd need for the kind of experiment shown in the film. His name appears on several declassified documents related to degaussing research, ship electrical systems, and magnetic field generation, standard wartime work. But in early 1944, Reston resigned from his position. No explanation given, no forwarding address, no subsequent employment. He vanished from professional life entirely. A historian, Dr. Sarah Timmons, tracked Reston's post-war life through census records, property deeds, and family documents. She found him living under a different name in rural Montana, working as a high school science teacher. He never published another scientific paper, never returned to physics research, never spoke publicly about his work during the war. In 1968, Reston died in a car accident. Among his personal effects, his family found a box of handwritten notes, mathematical equations, and schematic diagrams. Most were incomprehensible to his family, complex physics notation they couldn't interpret. But one page stood out. It contained a single sentence written in heavy black ink. "We opened a door we couldn't close. May God forgive us." Dr. Timmons obtained copies of Reston's notes and shared them with physicists familiar with electromagnetic field theory. Their assessment: the equations describe a resonant field system designed to create localized spacetime curvature. The math is decades ahead of what was publicly known in the 1940s. Some of the notation matches Einstein's unpublished unified field work, which wasn't declassified until the 1990s. How did Reston have access to that material in 1943? And why did he spend the rest of his life in self-imposed exile, teaching basic physics to high school students, refusing to touch the work that once defined him? One physicist who reviewed the notes suggested that Reston saw something during the Eldridge experiment that broke him professionally and psychologically, something that convinced him the research should never be continued. The classification system that doesn't exist. The logbook found in the vault references magic clearance, a classification level under which all Project Rainbow documentation was supposedly sealed. But magic wasn't a general classification system. It was the code word for Japanese diplomatic intelligence intercepts during World War II, handled by Army and Navy cryptographers. It had nothing to do with ship-based electromagnetic research. So why would Project Rainbow documents be sealed under magic clearance? One theory is that magic was used as a cover designation, deliberately chosen because it was compartmented and highly restricted. Anyone trying to access Project Rainbow files would be told they needed magic clearance, which would direct them toward cryptographic channels that had nothing to do with the actual project. It's a misdirection system, designed to frustrate anyone trying to trace the documentation. But there's another possibility, proposed by intelligence historians. What if Project Rainbow was connected to magic intercepts? Japanese naval communications in 1943 occasionally referenced American experimental programs, gleaned from signals intelligence and reconnaissance. If Japanese intelligence had learned about the Eldridge experiment, even fragmentary information, that might explain why Project Rainbow was classified under magic. The Navy would have wanted to control who knew that the Japanese knew. This theory is supported by a single declassified Japanese naval intelligence report from November 1943, which mentions American electromagnetic testing at Philadelphia. The report is vague, likely based on third-hand information, but it confirms that Japanese intelligence was aware something unusual had happened at the Philadelphia Naval Yard in late October. The report was intercepted and translated by magic cryptographers. If that intercept reached the Navy's attention, it would have triggered a security review, and the logical response would be to seal everything related to the Philadelphia tests under the same classification system as the intercept itself. It's a bureaucratic logic that makes sense in the paranoid environment of wartime intelligence. But it also means that researchers looking for Project Rainbow documentation are being deliberately routed into dead ends. The files exist, but they're hidden inside a classification system designed to make them invisible. The conclusion that terrifies. The evidence is contradictory. The film shows effects that physics says are impossible, but forensic analysis confirms the film is genuine. Witnesses describe events that sound like science fiction, but their accounts were documented at the time, not fabricated decades later. The Navy denies that Project Rainbow existed, but the vault was real. The logbook was real. The medical records existed before they were destroyed. So what actually happened on October 28, 1943? The most likely explanation is that the Navy did conduct an electromagnetic experiment aboard USS Eldridge, not degaussing, something more ambitious. They were testing theoretical physics that wasn't fully understood, using equipment pushed to limits it wasn't designed for, supervised by scientists who didn't anticipate the consequences, and something went catastrophically wrong. The ship may have experienced a genuine spacetime distortion, not a full teleportation, but a quantum superposition, existing in multiple locations simultaneously for a brief period. The crew, trapped inside the field, suffered biological effects from extreme electromagnetic exposure, combined with possible temporal displacement that fractured their perception of reality. 16 men died, 43 others were permanently damaged, and the Navy, faced with a disaster they couldn't explain and technology they couldn't control, made a decision. They sealed everything, destroyed the medical records, scattered the survivors, transferred the ship to other duties where its history could be buried, and locked the evidence in a concrete vault they never intended to open. The Philadelphia experiment wasn't a hoax. It was a failure, a failed attempt to weaponize physics we still don't fully understand 80 years later. And the reason the evidence was buried isn't to hide success, it's to hide catastrophe. Because if the experiment worked, even partially, it means the Navy accidentally discovered something in 1943 that we're not ready to control even today. And if it didn't work, if the effects shown in the film and described by witnesses were just unforeseen consequences of pushing electromagnetic fields too far, then it means there are failure modes in experimental physics that can kill and traumatize without leaving evidence that investigators would recognize. Either possibility is deeply unsettling. The film, the logbook, the vault, they're not proof of time travel or teleportation. They're proof that sometimes, when you push the boundaries of science, you don't discover new frontiers, you discover new ways to break reality. And the people who survive those experiments spend the rest of their lives trying to forget what they saw. USS Eldridge was scrapped in 1999, sold for scrap metal, her hull cut apart and melted down. Whatever secrets were embedded in that steel are gone now, turned into rebar and car parts. But the film remains, and the question remains. If the experiment failed this badly in 1943, with primitive equipment and incomplete theory, what happens when someone tries again? Because you know someone will. The math is there, the theory is there, and the vault was found. The only question is whether we'll learn from what happened the first time, or whether we'll have to rediscover the hard way that some doors, once opened, can't be closed.